Based on Daniel chapter 9, verse number 26, most scholars believe that the Antichrist is going to be a European, and he'll rise to power within the revived Roman Empire, because it was the Romans that destroyed the city of Jerusalem and the temple. And for years I believed that too, but I don't any longer. Most scholars believe that the Antichrist will be a European who rises to power within the revived Roman Empire. That's the traditional and the most popular position among premillennial scholars. But I don't hold to that theory. And I'll explain why in just a little bit. But first, let's look at the traditional position to find out why it's the most popular position. As I said, most premillennial scholars believe that the Antichrist will be a European, probably an Italian, who rises to power from within the revived Roman Empire. Now, this belief is based primarily on one verse. And do you know what one verse that is? Daniel chapter 9, verse 26. Yeah, part of the 70-week prophecy. I told you it was a very complex prophecy, and there were lots of aspects to it. In fact, this is one of the aspects. So go ahead and turn with me, if you would, to Daniel chapter 9, verse number 26, and follow along with me as I read this verse. And after 62 weeks shall the Messiah be cut off, but not for himself. And the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. Now, obviously, the prince that shall come refers to the Antichrist. And if you want confirmation of that, just continue reading in verse number 27. And it tells us that this is talking about the Antichrist. But I want you to notice what this verse says. It says that shortly after the Messiah is cut off, the people of the prince that shall come, in other words, the Antichrist, will destroy the city of Jerusalem and the temple. In other words, the Antichrist will be a descendant of the people that destroyed the city of Jerusalem and the temple in 70 AD. Now, if you're familiar with ancient history, you know that the Roman legions under General Titus destroyed the city of Jerusalem and the temple. So, based on Daniel chapter 9, verse number 26, most scholars believe that the Antichrist is going to be a European, and he'll rise to power within the revived Roman Empire, because it was the Romans that destroyed the city of Jerusalem and the temple. And for years I believed that too, but I don't any longer. So let me show you why I believe, or I don't believe, that the Antichrist is going to be a European that rises to power within the revived European or the revived Roman Empire. And in the process, you'll see why I believe that the Antichrist will be a Muslim that rises to power from one of the countries in the Middle East. So turn back to Daniel chapter 9, verse 26, and let's read it again. And after 62 weeks shall the Messiah be cut off, but not for himself. And the people, underline that word, people, of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. Now the word people is translated from the Hebrew word and it's used to refer to a specific ethnic group. In fact, let me show you how this word is used in the book of Genesis chapter 11, verse number 6. If you're familiar with the book of Genesis, you know that Genesis chapter 11 is about the Tower of Babel. God came down and he confused the people by giving them different languages. Because at one time, all of the people spoke the very same language. And they were supposed to disperse throughout the world, but they didn't do it. They clung together. And they were going to build this tower. So God came down, and the story is recorded in the book of Genesis, chapter 11, verse number 6. Notice what it says. Look, he said, the people, there's that word people, the Hebrew word the people are united, and they all speak the same language. After this, nothing they set out to do will be impossible for them. In other words, the people who were building the Tower of Babel were from the same ethnic group. They shared the same language, the same religion, the same culture, and they were of the same race, which in this case was dangerous. So God had to intervene by making them speak different languages, which is how different ethnic groups came into existence. With different languages came different ethnic groups. But my point is this. The Hebrew word is used to refer to a specific ethnic group. In other words, a specific race of people who share the same language, the same religion, and the same culture. Now, this is very important because Daniel is telling us which ethnic group the Antichrist is going to come from. But he's not telling us what nation or what empire he'll come from, at least not in this verse. Had he wanted to tell us what nation the Antichrist would come from, he would have used the Hebrew word go'i. Go'i refers to a specific nation, like Israel or Egypt or Greece. And had he wanted to tell us what kingdom he would come from or what empire, he would have used the Hebrew word memlakah, because memlakah refers to a specific kingdom or empire, such as the Babylonian Empire or the Assyrian Empire or the Roman Empire. But Daniel didn't care about that. What he wanted us to know is which ethnic group the Antichrist would come from. So he used the Hebrew word Now, the reason this is so important is because it gives us insight into his race, religion, language, and culture. In fact, let me give you an example to illustrate how important this is. Let's suppose that today, after church, I'm walking out to my car and I get mugged by two men. And when the police come and they ask me, "Can you identify your assailants?" I say, "Yes, I got a good look at them." So the police officer says, "Good. What did they look like and what can you tell us about them?" And I say, "There were two men and they were Americans." Now, what have I really told you about them? Nothing. You see, saying they were Americans tells us nothing about their ethnicity. The police don't know whether they were white, African American, Native American, Hispanic, or Asian American. They could be any ethnicity based on what I said. Now, here's what's interesting. The Roman Empire was even more diverse than America is. In fact, here's a map to show you how large the Roman Empire was. Take a look at this map on here. I want you to notice that it goes through most of Europe. You've got here Spain. This is France. This is England. This is Italy. Up here is Germany. You got all of this. You've got, of course, Italy. Now you're over here into Macedonia, which is Greece, and all of those countries. Then across the Black Sea, you've got the Asia Minor, which is Turkey. You go all the way up to the Caspian Sea, Afghanistan, all of those stands. You go all the way down through, this is the Fertile Crescent, by the way. So you go all the way from Judea and Lebanon and Syria, all the way up into Iraq and Iran to the Persian Sea. Then you have all of North Africa. Yeah, here's the thing that I want you to see. To say that it was the Roman Empire that destroyed the city of Jerusalem, the temple, tells you nothing. Nothing. But Daniel wanted us to know which ethnic group the Antichrist would come from. So he used the Hebrew word not go'i, not memlakah. And again, the reason this is so important is because it gives us insight into the Antichrist race, religion, language, and culture. So which ethnic group destroyed the city of Jerusalem and the temple in 70 AD? Does anyone know? Well, to answer that question, I need to give you a history lesson on the Roman Empire and its military. Before the Roman Empire actually became an empire, it was called the Roman Republic. And in the early days of the Republic, before it grew into this mighty empire, the majority of its soldiers were from Rome and the nearby regions of Italy. In other words, they were Italians. That was their ethnicity. They were of the same race, religion, culture, and language. But as the empire expanded, it became impossible to fill the military with men from Italy. The truth is, there just wasn't enough Italian men to serve in the military throughout the empire. So Caesar Augustus made some sweeping changes to solve the problem. The first thing he did was he placed all of the Italian soldiers into an elite military unit called the Praetorian Guard. Their job was to guard the emperor and the tents of the generals. And then each legion within the Roman Empire was made up of citizens from the provinces in which the legion was stationed. So different legions were made up of different ethnic groups, depending upon where they were stationed. Plus, each legion had a small group of praetorian guards to protect the tents of the generals and the Roman commanders. Now, when Israel rebelled against Rome, Roman legions were sent in to put down the rebellion, to stop it. And after they secured the northern part of Israel, they moved south and they laid siege to Jerusalem. 5 legions were involved in the siege of Jerusalem. Legion 5 from Judea, which was made up of Arabs, Syrians, and Edomites. Legion 10 from Syria, made up of Syrians. Legion 15 from Syria, also made up of Syrians. Legion 12 from Asia Minor and Syria, which was made up of soldiers primarily from Syria and a few from what is now eastern Turkey and northern Iraq. And Legion 3 from Syria, which is also made up of Syrians. Now, as you can see, 4 of the legions were from Syria and 1 was from Judea. And you can also see the majority of the soldiers were Syrians. So, what people or ethnic group destroyed the city of Jerusalem and the temple in 70 AD? Yeah, Syrians. So, according to Daniel chapter 9, verse 26, the ethnicity of the Antichrist is Syrian. Now, when we talk about ethnicity, we're talking about his race, his religion, his language, and his culture. So the Antichrist won't be a European who rises to power within the revived Roman Empire. He'll be a Muslim who rises to power in some country in the Middle East. Now, listen to me because this is important. You can't look at the modern country of Syria and say that the Antichrist is going to come from that country. Because in Daniel's time and at the time of Jesus Christ, Syria covered a much larger area. It covered the eastern part of modern-day Turkey, all of modern-day Syria, and parts of Jordan, Lebanon, and almost all of Iraq. So all we know is that the Antichrist will come from that vicinity and from that ethnic group. Now, here's what's really interesting. In the Old Testament, the Antichrist is referred to by a number of names. In fact, he's referred to by a number of different names in the New Testament. And every one of those names are a descriptor, whether it's son of perdition or even Antichrist. That's not his name. Antichrist tells you about him. Anti means against, and Christ, of course, the Messiah. He will be someone that's against or contrary to the Messiah. Yeah. Now, what's interesting, in the Old Testament, the Antichrist is commonly referred to as the Assyrian. Yeah. In Isaiah, in Ezekiel, and in the book of Micah, the Antichrist is referred to as the Assyrian. In fact, he is referred to more frequently as the Assyrian than by any other name in the Old Testament. Did you know that? Which is just further confirmation that the Antichrist is going to be a Muslim from the Middle East, not a European from the European area of the revived Roman Empire.